Good evening and welcome to the SEMLab Careers in Logistics and Supply Chain broadcast. This session will last for around 45 to 60 minutes and will include a speaker presentation followed by a panel discussion and student Q&A. This session will help you to learn more about what logistics means and the many careers involved in enabling other businesses to grow. Questions for today's speakers can be submitted via the Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen, and this will be open throughout today's session. I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, Paul Thompson. Paul is the Education and Skills Manager with SEMLab and will kickstart our discussion today with a short presentation. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Carly, and good evening, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us. Just to kind of introduce our organisation, we are the South East Midlands Local Enterprise Partnership. We're responsible for the economic development throughout the area, and that includes Bedfordshire, Luton, Milton Keynes and Northamptonshire. And one of those elements that we're responsible for is the skills agenda and the strategy locally. So we've got particular knowledge of the local labour market, and one of our challenges is to make sure that we've got plenty of young people and people from other age groups, etc., coming into the areas where we have opportunities. And so we're very keen to talk about logistics tonight, because that is one of those areas. The area itself, we've got about 1.7 million population and 886,000 of those are actually employment in the area. And last year alone, we had 160,000 job vacancies in the area. Despite COVID, it was still quite buoyant. And in fact, employment up until September, and these are the latest figures that we actually have, was still going up in the area. And you can see the trend there. It's been a growing employment market within the area for quite some time. Long may it continue. And our employability rate is one of the best in the country. Now that means, number of people working per population. And as you can see there, from 2019 through to September 2020, that was going up quite steeply. So we've got a lot of people coming into employment. The other good news is it's right across the patch. All the areas within our responsibility are going up. Northamptonshire in particularly has seen tremendous growth, and so we're hoping to continue that as well. In some areas like Milton Keynes and Northampton, we actually have more jobs than working age population, which does explain the traffic sometimes in the morning. There's a lot of jobs there. So we've got high levels of employment in the area. Does that mean you're going to walk into a job? Nope, absolutely not. There's certain things you need to kind of get straight, etc. But the good news is there's lots and lots of opportunity out there for you to do that. Job vacancies picture has looked a little bit different. We have seen a decline over the years, but the good news was at the beginning of 2020, we saw a tremendous increase, which bucked the national trend actually in terms of job vacancies. Now that said, these are still 160,000 job vacancies, remember. That's a lot, big number. And then lo and behold, obviously, what hit us and things slowed down. We saw a recovery after the first lockdown, second lockdown stalled it again. But I'm pleased to say that we're actually seeing a small increase now again. And in fact, job vacancies are currently running at about 73% of what they were pre-COVID, and in some areas like central beds, we were at 85%. It's very, very high. So it is starting to increase. The other thing is that some of the sectors were more resilient than others during COVID, and in fact some of them ironically benefited from COVID, and one of those was certainly logistics. So the logistics and supply chain sector. So this is really getting things to people or to businesses and from people and businesses to other businesses. Vital part of our economy. You can see for our local area, it's the biggest employer, about 130 odd thousand people working within it, about 16% of our employment population. So it's very, very key. Now, you may not be too familiar with exactly what logistics and supply chain means. I would urge you to watch a video called Love Logistics. It's quite a cool little short video, and it really absolutely nails exactly why logistics is so important to us. If we just look at the logistics and supply chain vacancies, You can see that we've seen an increase all the way through 2019 and 2020. Real positive impact. I mean, the reason being really is that everything is kind of handled by logistics. If you look around the room that you're sitting in at the moment, everything will have come through logistics at some point, or come to you in that way. There are increasing demands from businesses for smart logistics and smart supply. So businesses want things just turning up more or less just on time, ready for them to use, that kind of thing. The less stock they can hold, the better. So there's big demands from businesses in the way that things get to them and the supply chain works. I think probably most of us have used online purchasing, and COVID-19 really accelerated that. And so we're seeing a lot more online purchasing now than we've ever done. And there are certain trends happening as well, like same-day delivery. You know, we've 5 years ago, we probably wouldn't have seen anything like same-day delivery. It's becoming increasingly popular. You might have noticed, but we have left the EU. That's had a couple of impacts. One is that we actually have lost some staff from within the sector as people have returned back home, especially during the kind of COVID lockdown. The other thing is it's started to create a whole bunch of other jobs, because there are new roles certainly in business administration and opportunities for people with languages, because obviously, you know, there are new protocols now that we actually have to go through to actually get things moved into Europe and from Europe as well. But our biggest strength on the logistics side is that we are in the right place. Our location is absolutely superb, and Northamptonshire in particular, where I think the statistic is that it's within about 2 hours of about 70% of the population. It's the perfect location from the ports, in terms of rail freight terminals, things like that. So, you know, we are in the best place. The other really exciting thing, though, as well that's going on is that on the innovation side, we are starting to see new technologies coming through on logistics, and it's things like driverless vehicles, driverless lorries, that kind of thing. New kind of power trains, like new hydrogen power instead of diesel power on trucks and things like that. For those of you living in Milton Keynes and maybe in Northampton, you'll have seen the delivery little pods that you'd see the photo of there in the bottom right hand corner. And we're now starting to see experimentation with drones as well. So anybody who lives around the Cranfield area, you may well see some unusual things buzzing around where they're actually testing the delivery modes of these things. In terms of the jobs, it's quite diverse. I think most of us would probably have the perception of warehouse staff and drivers and probably understand that for logistics, but it's a whole bunch more of different jobs. And you can see on that list, there's lots of different things in there. And when you actually split it down, yeah, 38% of the jobs advertised are for warehouse staff, 16% for drivers, but 46% of the jobs advertised are outside of that. 40% are in business operations, and this is things like management, procurement, so that's buying things. Who doesn't like buying things? Finance, marketing, that kind of thing. Engineering is becoming increasingly required within the sector. Most of the big sheds, the big warehouses that you see are automated to some degree and becoming increasingly more automated. So mechatronics, robotics are becoming more important. And digital is huge. The digital systems, the data analysis, all that kind of thing becoming increasingly important in logistics. So there are some big opportunities and requirements in there. The money's not bad either. The average salaries here of those vacancies, those top 50 vacancies that you saw, are kind of shown there on the screen. You can progress through the businesses, take on different roles, move into supervision, management, that kind of thing, maybe in diversify into a different role. And so there are opportunities to actually up your earning potential whilst you're actually in the sector. One of the big things that come from the employers is the need for employability skills. And so, again, from those top 50 job roles that I showed earlier on, they kind of fit into three kind of broad categories. One is the core competencies. You might know them as soft skills or transferable skills. And these are the top 10 that come up time and time again. So communication skills, detail orientated means attention to detail, actually caring about what you do, basically. Organizational skills, planning, teamwork, collaboration, problem solving, that kind of thing. English is key, understanding English, being able to read, write, that kind of thing. And computer literacy is just coming up on the list. And really, that's Microsoft Office, if we're honest, Microsoft Excel and Word primarily. Some of the specialist skills for some of those job roles that you saw there, customer service, you're dealing with customers, etc. It's being able to kind of work in that way. Good. Again, this is where the communication skills come in. You see things like key performance indicators, they're targets, if you like. So being able to work to targets and achieve those targets. And there are some specific things you'll see in there, like forklift truck operators, things like that. There is a big need for that within the industry. And then if you actually look at the specific digital skills, I mentioned Microsoft Office and digital literacy. Excel is the one. It always is. Doesn't matter which sector we go into. It's the most important. But you'll also see some programming languages in there. There are need for programmers within the sector. So SQL and C++. SAP you'll see on there, and Oracle. They are business systems and probably two of the most common business systems that are used out there. So again, you tend to be trained by the operators that are actually kind of using that if you need those particular things. But Excel, I would urge every young person, please try and apply it, use it whilst you're in education. It will be invaluable for you for the future. It really will. Good news is there's some great places you can go and get information now about the sector. These are lots of different portals and kind of websites that will give you kind of information, but don't forget your local colleges, the Institute of Technology and the universities as well. As I said, over 40% of the jobs are actually within business operations and management. All of the colleges, universities locally provide services and actually careers and pathways within those. We've got digital facilities and we've got engineering facilities as well. So look out for those, that there's plenty of opportunities and pathways to take that. We are recording this session, so our intention is that we will actually put this broadcast and these slides actually on our webpage on where the labour market information is. So they'll be there, and we will keep refreshing them and updating them as we kind of go through. So if you ever want information, that could be a good place to start. So thanks very much for listening. Carly, back to you.
Thanks so much, Paul. What a great presentation. I think the focus on innovation was really interesting to hear about, and also always the requirements around Excel is always an interesting point. It's now time to move on to our panel discussion. We have 4 fantastic speakers joining us today who work in various roles across the logistics and supply chain industry. We will be sharing their biographies in the Q&A thread as we pose them their first question. And the first part of the discussion will focus on our speakers' pathways into their current roles. Firstly, James, we'd love to start with you if that's okay. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your current role and the route you took into it.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I work for Prologis, who are a very big company that maybe a lot of people might not have heard of, but we're all about logistics property, basically. So we're actually we're a global company and the biggest logistics property developer in the world, and we're very active in the South East Midlands region. So in terms of my role, I'm sort of responsible for the whole sort of life cycle of a building, really. So that's finding land that could be suitable to build a building on, and working through the planning process to get the planning permission to build that building, and then sort of and deciding what kind of building's needed, what demand is there for a building. And then once the building's been built, we need to find someone to occupy it. So we need to find an occupier. Lots of logistics companies want to be based in the East Midlands. So big companies, Amazon and Tesco, all of the supermarkets, all of the internet retailers, they're all looking for these big logistics buildings. and we're just looking to build the right buildings for those occupiers, really. So in terms of my background and how I found my way into this, I'm from a commercial property background, really. So I did a degree at university that was accredited by the RICS, which is the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. And then after qualifying from university, I worked for what you would call a general practice commercial surveyors. So that was CBRE, and then later also JLL, which some of you might have heard of. And then after a bit of time working there, I moved to Prologis, where I started specialising in the logistics property sector. And that brings me to where I am now.
That's great. Thank you so much, James. And did you know what you wanted to do when you were a teenager?
Well, I wanted to be a football player when I was a teenager, but that soon turned out that wasn't going to happen. So no, I didn't, and it probably wasn't until I was 18 or 19 that sort of working in property came to me as an idea and something that I might want to do. So I think the great thing about working in property is, it's never too late, really. There's lots of people that sort of change direction. I even I've met people that work in the industry who spent maybe 10 years doing a completely different, unrelated role, and decided to change pathways. So there's lots of routes of getting to the same place, really.
Fantastic, that's great. Thank you so much. And Bradley, we'd love to come to you next, if that's okay. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the journey into your current role.
So my journey was a bit unexpected, because the logistics industry isn't something I've ever considered as an industry I want to go into. But I've always had a passion for technology and computers and related stuff like that. So of course, logistics in my mind at the time was working in a warehouse and doing stuff like that and packing boxes and stuff like that. But to me, when I see an opportunity that is for me to do IT in the logistics industry, that's something I grasped at, and I'll be honest, I'm surprised in terms of how much there is that isn't what I thought, because while I've only been at my company for about 8 weeks, I've learned far more in those 8 weeks than I could have ever guessed, whether that's from customer service to communication skills and everything like that. But I always knew I wanted to go into an IT background. It's just the logistics industry is never something I would have considered to be a pathway into IT and computers.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And Jay, what is it that you're enjoying the most about your role at the moment?
What am I enjoying most? Well, right now we're on probation, so we've been here for 8 weeks. Moving around the company, working in different areas like production, dispatch, IT, finance. Right now we're in dispatch, and well, what's not to love, really? I mean, everyone there's so nice. I mean, the skills you learn, like the communication skills, the eye for accuracy. We've been doing eye for accuracy training and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been good.
Fantastic. And am I right in thinking that you will be starting a finance apprenticeship
soon?
Yeah,
finance. So in a month's time, we both start our apprenticeships, and me in finance and Bradley in IT. So yeah.
That's really cool. So what attracted, I guess, question for both of you, what attracted you to the apprenticeship route?
So I've always been a more of a work person. Like if I had to choose the option between going to school and work, that's just my ethic. Is I like to work. I like money. That's the core reason. But it also appeals to me more as a career aspect, because in my mind, to an employer, me having both a qualification and, let's say, 2 years of work experience can be a lot more appealing on a CV to places I'm applying compared to someone who's just done university, because of course having those 2 years of on-site work experience are more valuable than anything else you can possibly gain.
Yeah, most companies nowadays want experience over qualifications. Yeah. So I mean, if you're getting both at the same time, I mean, it's a
win-win.
Absolutely. I hear that often when our speakers are discussing apprenticeships, that it's a win-win scenario for employers and young people participating as well. So we will have more questions about the skills you're hoping to develop or are developing, and we'll come back to those later if that's okay. In the meantime, Sadie, it'd be really interesting if you could talk us through your journey into your current role, because I'm right in thinking that you've been in the logistics industry for, is it 8 months about now?
Yeah, about that. So actually, it's funny what James was saying then about different routes into a career. So I actually started out working in hospitality and catering, and I did 10 years in cafes and pubs. No, longer than that. I won't say how long, because that gives how old I am away. But yeah, I did it for a long time, and I got to a certain age, and I thought, I don't think I can keep it up, especially working in pubs. It's quite hard work. So I thought I'll go and find something else, and I didn't care what I did, and I thought I'll just go and get a customer service job somewhere in telephone, sit down for a living. That'd be nice. And I met this recruiter who worked for an agency, and I said to her, I need to restart my career. I've been doing this for so long. I've got these transferable skills. What can you help me do? And she was so lovely, and she really helped me. And actually, it changed my life, that conversation and that person, and it really did get me onto a path that has been amazing for me and I've really enjoyed. So I did this great little customer service role. Actually, it was kind of a logistics company. It was like a pharmaceutical dispatch business, patient home care. So I did that for about 18 months and I loved it. Then got made redundant, and then thought, what should I do? I thought, I know, I'll be a recruiter. That's a great job, right? Everybody get people jobs. How lovely. So I went and worked for an agency for a little while, did that for a few years. And then more recently, I was actually made redundant during COVID, during the pandemic. And so I started to look for another job and found James & James Fulfilment, which is where I work now. And they are a online, so it's an e-com fulfilment, which is online purchasing. So they sort of fulfill orders for smaller businesses that can't ship themselves. So perhaps somebody that's doing something out of their own garage and it's got too big for them and they need somebody to come and do all that for them. And I thought, what a great industry to work in, especially at the moment when everything's closed down, it's all going wrong, but everybody's shopping online. And also they have their own software platform and all this technology and really cool stuff. So I'd worked in recruitment technology before, so I was quite interested in that. So yeah, I thought, great, perfect, bulletproof industry at the moment. Went in there, interviewed such like you were saying, Bradley, such lovely people, really down to earth, great community, and I've just loved it, absolutely loved it. So what I do now is I'm really helping that business to grow. So I was brought in as my job title was talent acquisition manager, which is basically I recruit for the business, and I work with all the managers in every department in that building and help them to find people to help us grow the business. As more and more people are shopping online, and it's it's been fantastic, really good.
That's really great, and we'll definitely move on to a few conversations later around what young people can do to help prepare for interviews and to get noticed by someone in your role, Sadie, if they're applying for apprenticeships or jobs. And Bradley, we'd love to come back to you if that's okay. As part of this session, we're really keen to demystify the logistics and supply chain industry for young people. So we'd be really keen in knowing, are there any job titles or job roles that you've come across in the past 8 weeks that you had no idea existed before you started in this role?
I'll use my job title as the first example, which is I'm a dispatch and export executive apprentice, which can sound like a mouthful, but that is something I'd never heard for prior 10 weeks ago when I applied. But there's a lot, like you wouldn't think if you go to a logistics company you could develop customer service skills or key teamwork skills, communication skills, office skills using Word, Excel, and being able to manage multiple things on time while also scheduling deliveries and stuff. So I think that's very important. But in terms of jobs and roles I've never heard of, there's anything from a customer service executive, apprentices, and everything like that, and they're all there's stuff you've never heard of, and when you actually look into what they are, they can be just as appealing as any other job you might be considering.
That's great, thank you. And Jay, are there any job roles that have surprised you in this role?
A full IT department. There's a whole IT department. which walk around the company, fix any issues you have, all the servers, they keep all the clients on, all the products. I'd never thought in a logistics company there'd be a full IT department.
That's great, thank you. I think that's really helpful to just show the different sides of businesses that our young people might not be aware of right now. That's really exciting, thank you. And James, we're just going to move to you if that's okay. And I think Paul alluded earlier into a few of the ways and innovations that the logistics and supply chain sector is growing. But how do you see things developing in the next 5 to 10 years? Is there anything that's kind of going to interest you in particular at all, James?
Yeah, so I mean, logistics is growing at an alarming rate. You know, it really is. The COVID pandemic has accelerated that. I saw some stats recently to say that online shopping basically grew the same in 6 months as it did in the previous 5 years when the pandemic first hit. You know, we all know people, you know, particularly in older generations who were perhaps first of all a little bit hesitant about shopping online, and they've probably overcome that now as a result of the pandemic. And once people create new habits, they tend to not go back. So, you know, these new online shoppers are probably not going to go back to the high street quite as much as they used to. It's not to say they won't go to the high street, but they'll maybe go a little bit less. So, you know, online retail is really driving logistics, and that trend is just going to continue. And you know, in terms of technology, there's all sorts of technologies that are coming into play. Many of these warehouses are now sort of, you know, fully automated, which, you know, that might sound like it's doing people out of jobs, but actually they're just different types of jobs. You know, in some of these warehouses, you know, they need lots of technicians to manage this automation, and engineers. So you know, it's a really interesting time for logistics. Just one of the you know, innovation really is all around electric vehicles, because there's such a drive towards electric vehicles that you know, electric charging points are being installed to you know, future-proof the buildings, so that you know, both employees' vehicles who are coming to work in these buildings, but also you know, the trucks and the vans that are using these buildings for the logistics are able to charge at the building.
That's great, thank you so much. And Sadie, just thinking about those kind of potential innovation areas that James just highlighted, in your kind of 8 months in the industry, have you kind of spotted any future talent or new roles that you think would need to be created in the future?
Well, that's a really good question. Well, just looking at James and James, I guess that's my area of expertise, the kind of roles that we recruit for, and again in IT software. We do quite a lot in that area because of our own software platform. So I mean, it's just, if you're into it, get into it. IT and software, it is just the thing. And even in, as you say, guys, it's even in logistics. There are so many opportunities because there's so much to logistics. It's not just about putting stuff in a van and shipping it somewhere or taking it somewhere. There's just so much to it. There's all the customer service element to it. There's the finance side of it, so running the business and making sure it's profitable. Of course, there's the operation and making sure that all runs smoothly, but it's not just about, you know, moving things around a room or putting something in a box. There's, you know, there's automation and the technology around that as well. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, client relationships and client services, that's another big thing that's up and coming, and really looking after our clients and helping them to grow their businesses and all that kind of good stuff. And I would say, you know, sales, what a great career as well. If you're personable and you know, you get on well with people, what a great way to earn some fantastic money, and meet great people and touch base with all sorts of parts of the business and learn about how businesses grow. I mean, there's so many opportunities. It's make your head spin really, but yeah. That's
fantastic, thank you so much. And James, just thinking about what Sadie just said there about the misconception that logistics could just be putting something in a van and shipping it, are there any of the misconceptions that you had before you entered the industry, and that you kind of had challenged throughout your career, I guess?
Yeah, so I think the big one is that warehouses are these sort of big, dirty, horrible sort of buildings, and not very nice places to work. But actually, a lot of warehouse buildings now are really modern buildings with great natural light and great amenities. A lot of the buildings that we're installing, we're really thinking about installing sort of really good welfare provisions. So, a lot of them have gyms in, a lot of them have sort of green spaces nearby where people can go for a walk during their break or their lunch hour. Outdoor gym equipment, lots of things like that, just to try and make these places really good places to work. Great environments, really.
That's great, thank you so much. We'd love to focus now on some of the skills that can be really helpful for young people if they were considering a career in logistics. And so Jay, we'd love to come to you first, if that's okay. If you could talk to us a little bit about some of these skills that you're developing right now, and are they things that your organisation are looking to help you develop in as well?
Yeah, communication is the biggest one for sure, because you're moving around the company. It all works like an oiled engine. You have to talk to everyone so they can talk to someone else, so they can do this to do that. So communication is number one. What is it called? Computer literature. You're always, no matter where you are, unless you're in the warehouse, you're on the computer. You're doing your bits, and yeah, so them two for me are the most important. And they're the two I'm working on personally right now.
Fantastic, that's great. That really chimes with what Paul was saying earlier around kind of Office 365, Excel, and having that kind of confidence as well, which is really great. And Bradley, is there anything that you would want to add to that? Any skills that you think you're kind of really focused on developing right now?
So the main thing I would focus on would be attention to detail and paying attention to what's actually going on, because of course throughout our everyday work we are constantly dealing with long strings of numbers, which can be confusing. And when you're updating information, looking for tracking codes and seeing where an item is, making sure you're aware of what's going on, and you're actually conscious that if you put in one wrong number, for example, you might get the tracking for a completely different product, and then someone will be told, oh yeah, your package is in Spain, when they only wanted to send it down the road. So just being aware, being able to communicate, and being aware of what's going on at all times, which, to be honest, I think is not only just a good skill to have within the industry, but also as a general life skill, to be able to be organized, communicate, and make sure you understand everything that's going on to reduce the risk of mistakes.
Absolutely, that's fantastic advice, thank you. And I mean, this might be a slightly trickier question, but just thinking about your applications into these roles, what skills do you think helped you stand out and kind of be successful?
Grades. The grades. No, I had previous experience. I was an electrician. I'd done 2 years apprenticeship as an electrician, and then decided I wanted to change it up. So I had a previous job that's all involved communication skills, numbers for sure, and electrician. So yeah, that's
amazing. Is there anything else you'd add to that, Bradley?
Oh, what could I add? I think Jay covered everything I was about to say. I think the main thing for me would be my prior experience. So I've had a lot of jobs where I've been on my feet, moving around. Where I've previously worked at Currys BC World, so being on my feet, dealing with computers every day, speaking to people about things they need to know, and being able to communicate on the spot to a customer or any interested party, I think is something that helped me get me into my position.
Fantastic, and I think we'll definitely have some questions around work experience later as well, and how important that could be for young people in securing positions once they leave school as well. So we'll definitely loop back to you there as well, if that's okay. And Sadie, kind of working in that recruitment and kind of talent management space, it'd be really helpful if you could talk to us about any, I guess, gaps or skills gaps that you might have identified in the industry that could help young people think about where they might fit in the future.
Well, just skills gap. I'd hate to keep harping on about it, but it is software and IT. There is a big skills gap there. Finance as well. There's a big drive for finance currently. Actually, I think software and finance are pretty much neck and neck. I'm recruiting into both those teams at the moment, so that's quite interesting. So yeah, really good industries to get into, and I think, yeah, I'd say they're probably my top two in terms of those that are the most sought after at the moment, and that probably, looking at the operation side as well, there's always that sort of data based role, so anybody that's into the analytics side. I mean, there's a lot of numbers involved in logistics, and a lot of data, so it's having people that know how to work with it, look at it, investigate it, and that can save money for the business or save time or make things better for our clients. It's a massive value add, so anybody that's into an Excel spreadsheet or whatever is going to enjoy working in that, and the value add basically. So yeah, anybody that can work Excel, I'm always like, yeah, you're amazing, because it's beyond me completely.
That's fantastic, and I love that you spoke about finance and IT there, and that absolutely chimes with Bradley and Jay's experience and what they're doing at the moment as well, which just fits so nicely. And just thinking about what employers are looking for when you're recruiting, what could our audience do to make their CVs or their applications stand out to you?
I think, yeah, that's a really good question, and I think standing out is key, because we do get a lot of applications. That does happen. So to stand up, whatever role, whether you're applying for client services, customer services, or actually in the operation itself, and coming in at any level, one of the best if I could tell you actually about one of the couple of really cool applications that we've had. I've had people. I've had one person actually send me a TikTok video, which was really cool, and she did a whole sort of dance with the words of why she would be great for the job. So I mean, that's like massively extreme and quite dedicated to come in and join our brand. So that was really cool. But anybody that takes the time to, perhaps really look at the role, look at the skills, look at the company, and identify what's spoken to them about that, rather than just kind of spamming out a CV. It's showing your personal interest, and maybe not just sending it and applying in the usual way. Quite often somebody might contact me on LinkedIn and say, I've applied for this job and I just wanted to reach out and say, that I'm really keen, and could we have a chat? Is there any chance you could give me some more information about the role? And I think most recruiters and most teams will welcome that, because it's just such a nice thing to have that kind of interest and enthusiasm about your company. So yeah, I would advise you do that.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you so much. And James, just kind of coming to you next, if that's okay. Bradley and Jay have spoken around kind of how their current experience helps them be successful in their current positions. And would you recommend students contact organisations for work experience? And if they were to do that, what would make an email to you stand out as to think, this is a student I want to help?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of kind of property or property logistics companies are more than happy to help with work experience. So I think it's just shown a real interest, that you're interested in the industry, rather than you're just trying to go through the motions because you want some work experience to put on your CV. Just really try to show that you've got some interest and passion for the industry, really.
That's great, thank you so much. And Sadie, just coming back to you again, thinking about any interviews that our audience might have coming up for positions or even for work experience at the moment. Do you have any kind of top interview tips that they might want to think about and consider?
Top interview tips. Well, I mean, it very much depends on what they're applying for, but I think it's always, when you always basic things, get the basic things right. So make sure you've done your research on the company, and that you've understood what it is you're interviewing for, and who, maybe do a bit of research on the person that you're meeting. Again, I mentioned LinkedIn again, or any other kind of social media, really. It's quite good to have a bit of an awareness of what that company does, and what maybe even your interviewer has done and what their background is. If you can identify maybe a bit of common ground or anything like that, that could quite nicely build a relationship with somebody. I know it's a really tough one, but try not to be nervous and just be yourself, because I think for most businesses, and I think nearly every people team will tell you this, that culture fit is everything. You don't have to have been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. But having the right attitude and having that right culture is key, and it will get you far. So being yourself, I think, is Might sound cheesy, but I think it's true.
I think that's fantastic. Is there anything about virtual interviews that might be slightly different for our audience to think about, as that's how a lot of recruitment's happening at the moment?
Yeah, I think anything slightly, be aware of what's in the background. That's always a good tip. Although, I mean, or don't, because it's quite entertaining. It's quite entertaining sometimes. I mean, if somebody's pigeon fell down someone's chimney, for example, when you're it might be quite entertaining. Or cats and pets and animals. I think people are quite accepting of when you're interviewing at home and you're working at home, all kinds of stuff can happen, and it's quite a good icebreaker actually. I think that interviews are probably less formal in a lot of industries and a lot of companies. I know it is at James and James, we're quite relaxed, it's quite an informal kind of thing. So I guess again it's just think about what you're wearing as well. I mean, I'm not saying turn up in a in full office regalia, but maybe not your pajamas. Maybe that relaxed, but somewhere in between.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you so much. And Bradley and Jay, would love to look to you next, if that's okay, just thinking about some of your interview experiences. Are there any questions that you would recommend young people ask in interviews to help make themselves stand out?
Just wear a shirt.
Perfect advice.
Cover everywhere.
I think one of the most important questions to ask during when you're being interviewed is what an actual day in the job is like, because of course you get told what the job is, what skills they want to see, everything you can learn, but like when you actually ask if I was to get the job today and I was to start today, what would I actually be doing? Because it's all good in saying I have these skills, but knowing exactly what you're going to be doing during the day is a better understanding of the job you're actually applying for, because being actually able to see exactly what you're doing gives you a better idea for, is this something I actually want to do? And I think that's very important, actually finding out if I was to work for one day, what would you have me doing and why? And that gives you that will be the best the best understanding for what the actual job is.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And James, I'm going to come to you next because I'm aware you have to leave us in a couple of minutes. But I guess it'd be really helpful if you could talk to us about anything that you would wish you had known before you started working in the logistics industry.
It's a tough one. I think it's basically just getting a real understanding of that logistics is really driven by the demand from people. We all sit in our homes and order things online and do our shopping on groceries online, and basically the logistics sector will just be driven by what people want and when they want it and where they want it. And increasingly people are wanting things quicker and quicker. Most companies are doing sort of next day delivery. Some companies are doing same day delivery. You can order something online at midday, and by 4 p.m. there's a knock at the door and whatever you've ordered shows up. So it's just changing habits of people and consumers will effectively change the logistics sector.
That's great, thank you. And what's the one thing that you enjoy the most about your job?
So I really like seeing the building throughout the sort of whole life cycle. So some projects when you have to work through a sort of a long planning process, they can take 10 years, and so some projects that I'm just starting now, there's a good chance that I might not be working on that project when it finishes in 10 years time, and likewise there's some projects that are now sort of right at the end of that process that I wasn't, one of my predecessors started off 10 years ago, and it's just seeing all of the different projects at all of the different stages, really. It's really interesting.
Fantastic. And finally, James, before you have to leave us, what's the one piece of advice you would like to leave our students with today?
I think work hard and do make sure that whatever career or pathway you choose is something that you're interested in, and if you're interested in it, then you'll be good at it, and people will always want to employ you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, James, and thank you for being with us today. I know you have to dash off now, but yes, thank you for making the time to be with us this evening.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
And Sadie, we'd love to come to you now, if that's okay. We spoke about the fact that you've been in your role and within the current industry for about 8 months. How does this position differ from your previous roles, and were there any kind of skills or characteristics that helped you transition between sectors and positions?
Are we talking from pubs to recruitment, or from?
Yeah, actually,
yeah,
why not? Customer service skills, communication.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was all those kind of things, people skills, and being able to communicate with people, all types of people from all walks of life, and talk to them about all kinds of things. And being able to evaluate people as well. Obviously, when you're interviewing people, you're wanting to get to know them, and you've got a short period of time to really understand them and what makes them tick, and get a good and honest impression of what that person's skills and attributes are and what their cultural fit's like. So I think that gave me a lot of skills in that area. I mean, it taught me a million things working in a pub, which is probably another broadcast, but yeah, that it was a great thing to do and a great experience. But yeah, definitely I would say to answer your question, yeah, those were the kind of skills that brought me across. When I went into the agency side of things, it taught me to work with all kinds of different roles. So you get to understand a role and what the nuances of that role are, and what that means to a business, and kind of you learn all sorts of things, like how much salary that should be, and what kind of skills that person needs, and whether that's actually needed for that business or not. You get to really understand the way that a business works and the intricacies of the business. So when I came to James & James, it was great because I'd worked across so many different roles, because I'd worked with a lot of clients in an agency environment. I'd done so much, it had been really, really broad. And because the logistics industry does have a lot of different departments and different elements to it. So actually, ironically, the warehousing side of it I'd not done before. And that's like 50%. And those statistics that Paul talked about earlier, very relevant to what I'm working with. It's about 50-50 in terms of the people that we've brought in over the past 12 months. So the whole logistics side of it, the actual operation, the warehousing, that was all a new learning curve for me. But yeah, so that's kind of that's what's really helped me. My enthusiasm for it, I guess, like the guys were saying, when you're interested in something and you just love it. It's I think that stands you in good stead. That answers your question.
Perfect, thank you so much. Jay, I think you mentioned earlier that you moved from an electrician apprenticeship into your current role now as well. Would you agree with the idea that you don't have to have everything figured out when you're in school about what you want to do?
Yeah, and I got told, so I got advised by my parents what to do on both halves. My dad said electrics, and my mum said finance. So I've moved from electrics to finance. So.
But I think it's interesting to see that. I think there'd be a lot of pressure on young people today. You have to have it all figured out when you're in school, and actually that's not always the way.
Go get the experience. Like, go down to Tesco's, get a job at Tesco's. It all looks good on the CV. Just go and find what you like, what you love.
Absolutely, that's great. And Bradley, would you think that kind of finding that thing that you really enjoy is really important in your career?
To be honest, I think that's the most important thing. Get yourself into. Don't fake your way into an industry you're not going to enjoy, because at the end of the day, if you enjoy the work that you do, you're essentially getting paid to do a hobby. In a nutshell, and I can relate that back to previous employments I've had, where I enjoyed it, and it basically felt like I was getting paid to do what I enjoy, which is the best. And if you enjoy what you do, you perform better.
Or what you're good at.
Absolutely, some great advice here. Thank you both so much. And just finally, I think our students would be really interested in how can they make the most of their work experience opportunities. Do you have any top tips or advice there at all?
Ask questions. Ask questions. That's my top tip.
Absolutely. Bradley, anything to add to that?
I'd completely agree with Joe on that. Ask there's as much information as possible. It doesn't hurt to know, what are their hours like? That additional piece of information, it does absolutely no damage to you, and it can only benefit you.
Or call the company and ask what their services are, and they tell you it's free. So.
That's such a good tip. That's great. And Sadie, just thinking about students that you might have with your own work experience, I guess what really helps them stand out to you, and are there any things that you would recommend they do during their time with you as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, enjoy it and talk to people and get to know people. I think when you've sort of made friends in work and you get to talk to people and it, you know, quite often it's just about, as I said, I keep coming back to this cultural fit thing. I think if you're you know, you're meeting the right people and you're talking to people and you're getting yourself known, you're working hard, obviously you're being reliable, or you're perhaps being a bit creative and getting to understand the role and thinking like, oh, perhaps we could try doing this a different way, or people love all that kind of stuff. You know, I love it when somebody comes to me with a great idea, or so yeah, just go for it, be confident. I think if you could go back and give you, I'm sure everybody would say this, if you go back and give your younger self anything, it would be confidence, which is a hard thing to just say, just like, you know, be confident, but it goes a long way. Fake it till you make it.
Absolutely, that's great. And we're going to be drawing the session to a close shortly. So Sadie, is there one piece of advice that you would like to leave our audience with today?
Is there one piece of advice for going out and discovering your career and finding your next job?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, do you know what, these James and Jay and Bradley, you've absolutely nailed it today. I think the attitude that these guys have got and the way that they've talked about going out there, doing something, even if it doesn't seem like, I don't want to, you know, not something that you want to do for the rest of your life, is to just go out there, have a go, get working with people, build your communication skills, get used to being in a working environment, and then just go for it and try a few things. You know, just because it's the first thing you've ever done doesn't mean it has to be the last thing.
Fantastic. And Bradley, any final thoughts from you for our audience today?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, just any final thoughts or advice for the audience today?
I think it's a false narrative to believe that you're meant to have your whole life sorted by the time you're 20 years old. I think it's you don't know until you know, and trying to pretend you think you know what you're doing. Just, you know, be honest with yourself, and if you're not sure, try things you've never tried before. I would have never applied for logistics, to be honest. If I didn't see it, something would never cross my mind. But look at me now.
That's great. And Jay, any final words of advice for our audience?
There's no harm in trying, so just go and try.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you both so much for being with us today. And as Sadie said, if everyone can be a little bit more like Bradley and Jay, then they'll probably do pretty well. So a huge thank you to our panel for joining us today and to our audience for tuning in. We've posted a feedback form in the Q&A thread. It'd be great if you could complete this for us. We hope you've enjoyed the SEMLab broadcast this week. They will all be available to view on the SEMLab website in due course, and we'll be in touch with that information when we have it available. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.